what are we saving for? Or where are we going for that? It's like, hey, do we need a new car? Should we get a new car? What do you think? If the husband goes, yeah, okay, sounds good. Or no, I don't think so. You're not using your words. You're not sharing how you feel. And your spouse can't do that. As soon as, like you said, well, Ryan's like, well, this is what I'm thinking, and this is what's working, and this is what's going okay. Michelle, you're like, okay, I can go implement that. Mm-hmm. I can write the check for that. I can do those pieces. That's the running part, but the leadership part is like, I need some input. I want it to be a we, not just me saying yes or no, or just not this man going, this is how it is. You got to talk and communicate, but that's that leadership piece.
This is Ryan and Michelle, and welcome to the Celebrate MarriageCast, where we hope to restore and reclaim godly marriages through honest and real conversations.
Hello. Thank you, listener, for joining us today and investing in your relationship. We're so proud of you for doing that, for making that time commitment to grow your relationship. And this is episode 72, but this also kicks off the month of February, which is the month that has that holiday, Ryan.
Oh, yeah.
You got it on your calendar, right? With little hearts and X's and O's, right? You're looking forward to it. We have a gift for you, our listener, a Valentine's gift, if you will. We are doing a 2-part episode with our friend and special guest of the Celebrate MarriageCast, Tony Boer of Sioux Empire Christian Counseling. And he is going to walk us through what men want and what women want and what he's seen in counseling. So welcome, Tony.
All right,
welcome, Tony. Well, we are super excited today, especially being a man. And this is like kind of backstage stuff. Like, we're getting the stuff that you're hearing every day. And so maybe just right off the bat, Tony, share with us, what are you hearing from women in counseling about what are they wanting? What are they needing from their husbands? Because
today we're focusing on, you may have guessed it, men. Today is the guys' day. I'm going to just try to be quiet over here.
So we'll ask a few questions, but we'll see if Michelle can just sneak
I'm
in and hear from behind and
like
peek in behind the curtain, right?
Yep.
So I guess, we'll ask, what do you guys think is the number one thing or number one frustration or complaint that I'll hear from women? Where they're like, hey, I wish my husband, what do you think that is?
I think I can tell you for us.
What do you think it is?
Probably communication and just opening up.
Yeah, my guess is gonna be like, listen. Like, I wish my husband would listen to me more. I'm not. This is just general. Ryan, you are a great listener.
Well, and pause. We got to talk. Let's do some counseling right now.
Right.
Ryan is an amazing listener, like the best.
Thanks, Michelle.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and you guys are both right? Okay. It's some form of communication. You'll hear people say that is communicate more, talk, I don't feel connected, I want to be more engaged, he isn't listening, or he doesn't get me. Those are all just forms or kind of versions or another ways of saying we don't communicate very well. So if that's the number one thing that I hear all the time is we don't communicate, we're not on the same page, we don't connect. I'll ask the guy in therapy, who's usually sitting there reluctantly, and what does she mean by that? What do you think he says?
I would guess he doesn't know.
I would say I don't know. That's
the number one thing here is like, I don't know. Like, so hang on a minute. That's the number one thing that she's saying and frustrated with, and he doesn't even know what she's talking about. Man, that's a big problem, and that's a setup. And that's that part where most of marriage therapy is always teaching couples, hey, what does that connection mean? Not talking about facts, but talking about these feelings and just trying to help couples. Hey, what does your wife want, right? Well, she wants me to communicate with her more. Okay. And you'll even hear sometimes, well, I'm there, Tony. I sit, I will listen, I will kind of talk. And the wife will say, yeah, but he's not really engaged, or I don't think he really understood what I was trying to say, or I don't think he got it. What that usually means is, oh, you weren't sending enough feelings, buddy. You were just kind of listening, but you weren't connected. And so that's kind of that frustration.
Sure. So he's maybe responding like, yeah.
answering,
but not really insightfully.
Or she'll say, I don't feel like you listened to me last week when we were going to a soccer game and you didn't understand. He's like, well, last week at the soccer game, I was doing this. And he starts talking about the incident instead of hearing, I was frustrated. Oh, the story. Because men, we like to solve problems, right? We're always trying to solve problems. We're always trying to fix. So if the wife is trying to explain why she's feeling a certain way and starts using too many facts, he's going to respond to the facts. Well, you never help around the house. Well, I mowed the lawn. I did this. I did these things. And she's like, well, no. And he misses it. What is she? Is she trying to say that you don't do anything? Or is she trying to say she's frustrated and overwhelmed? And so as soon as he can go, it's like, oh, I think she's trying to tell me she's overwhelmed or she needs help. And you talk that way, that's what your wife is looking for. That is what she's needing. And it's a tricky concept. I had a guy just the other day when we were talking about this. You know who you are, because I'm using his story all the time, and it's awesome. He's like, okay, so if me and my wife were stuck on a desert island, you know, the little island where it's just the little mound of sand and the one palm tree.
Right.
He goes, and we're both sitting there, and I can see what she does all day long, and she can see what I do all day long. Do I still have to ask her how was her day? Because we already know. And I'm like, yes, buddy, you do. He goes, well, what would I be asking? I just saw everything she did all day. She saw everything I did all day. Why would I have to ask her how was her day? But it kind of illustrates, it's like, yeah, but what we're asking is, how are you feeling about your day? What was good? What was bad? All those emotions that you don't know just by looking. And so that kind of encapsulates very well. Is like, that's what we mean by communication is, even if you see and you think you know everything that just visually happened or factually happened, you don't know how your spouse is feeling. And men, since this is about you, that's what your wife is desiring. She wants to be heard, felt, and loved. And how you do that is checking with those feelings, not solving problems, not fixing all the facts, not doing all that stuff, is letting her feel like, this guy gets me.
Yeah. We just talked about this in life group, didn't we, Ryan? About like things that we've learned in communication. And you had shared that I realized that I have to respond. I need to acknowledge Michelle's feelings, not just the facts and what she's saying.
Yeah. Yeah. We shared it in kind of the context of, so of really almost separating the two worlds, because like when I'm at work, like everything is numbers, everything is facts. And that's what I deal with every day. And so then naturally when I come home, I often I found myself responding with facts. Yes. Like, hey, there's no feelings here. This is the way it is. Boom, 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 boom. And but it brings up a question, I guess, for me is why are those feelings so difficult for men?
Yeah. Oh, I don't know. Other than it doesn't make sense to me. Now, I'm obviously a guy that's a little more in touch with my feelings because I talk about feelings all day long. But that really brings kind of that next big point is like, man, you need to be a little vulnerable. You need to say what you're thinking. And a lot of times men think, I'm not very good with my feelings. I don't have them. I can't, why don't we do that very well? To your question is, and I would say you're selling yourself short. Is you probably do it very well. You just don't like to feel uncomfortable. And maybe not you, but I mean men in general. Sorry, I'm not picking on you.
No,
but just men in general. Yeah. And so what happens is there are lots of times where in therapy, I'll have a guy sit down. He's like, Tony, and he's there by himself. You got to help me. I don't know how to tell my wife that when she starts telling me I'm doing things wrong, it just feels like she is nagging on me and berating me. And I feel like I'm this little kid. I'm just like growing up at home and my dad was just a jerk and I could never do anything right. And I just can't handle that when she does that. So I just got to take off and I go to the garage. I don't know how to tell her that. Like, dude, that seems pretty good. Let's go with that one, right? That would be awesome. Right. And then sometimes they'll come in the next session or sometimes I'll split couples up. And so she'll come in, I'm like, okay. And I'll tell her, it's like, hey, we were just kind of talking a little bit. And, he kind of had some thoughts about how he feels when you guys are fighting. Why don't you tell your wife how you feel when you're fighting? And he goes, I don't like it when you yell at me. And then I have to go, well, and I tell this whole story, and she's like, yeah, Tony, that sounds really good, but that's not how he feels. That's not what's going on. He didn't say that. He just says he just doesn't like me nagging at him. And because the guy didn't do that, he didn't share that, but he's totally capable of that. I hear that all the time, but sometimes it's easier to say that to me than to your spouse. Sure. And that's that piece when you're like, why is it hard? Because it's vulnerable, and it's hard for all of us to be vulnerable, but I think it's harder for men to admit that you're weak because it feels weak. Vulnerable isn't weak, but it feels that way. So that would be the long answer to why I think that's hard. But too often men said, oh, it's too hard, so I can't do it. No, you have feelings. You understand them. You know what's going on. You can share them.
I think that even society kind of molds guys in that way, though. Even observing the boys playing in our backyard in our neighborhood, it's like the boys will get hurt, and it's like I'll hear other parents say, like, brush it off, buddy. You're tough. Like, just brush the dirt off your face. Where if it was like if a girl got knocked off of a play set, I feel like people would respond differently, and it'd be okay if they cried and be like, "Oh, are you okay?" Like, hey, like, come here, let mommy give you a kiss or whatever. But for whatever reason, it's like, oh, like, be tough, buddy. Like, and that's not, I feel like I've been softer with like our son. I don't say those things to him, but I think society maybe just, that's how you're raised.
Yeah, there's maybe. We're conditioned like, not to say we're sad or upset. We're conditioned just to keep those feelings inside and keep going, which actually, when you talk about at work, that works really good at work, right? That's why men are really good with facts. That's why men make really good soldiers. We can shut our things off and just kind of go and do the things we need to do, compartmentalize and do all that stuff. So it works really well in almost all aspects of your life, except for one, in a relationship with your wife. Then you got to be able to let your guard down. And I'll have men go, man, I'm not going to be a touchy-feely guy, and I don't have that in me, and it's just too hard. And I'm like, hey, buddy, I'm not asking you to do that for everybody. You can kind of keep doing life the way you're doing it with everybody else. There's just one person you got to do this with. Sure. You have to do this with your wife. And then you got to work on doing it with your kids. But you just need one. You don't need to be vulnerable to everybody that you meet. Just connect with your spouse. And it's so powerful.
Yeah, I think it's a great topic because I can relate to this, and I feel like I feel like this is a perfect time for this because as I've been going through my knee, having surgery on my knee, getting that better. It's been a long process, and it's been hard, and it's very hard to show weakness. It's very hard to open up and tell Michelle like the struggles that are happening. Like that's very difficult. Yeah. And I think it does boil down to weakness. Like it feels that way of opening up, telling her like, hey, I'm really struggling. And so but I think it has helped immensely to let you into my world and what's happening. But I get it. I get it that it's hard.
And just to pick on you, because that's a good topic to talk about just from the perspective of men say what you think, right? When they say, how do I do my feelings? How do I share my feelings? Say what you're thinking. So in your case, you can go as like, let's say you have PT therapy and you're like, oh man, this is hard. This sucks. This is painful. Is this worth this? I don't know if I can do this. This is overwhelming. And you think all that. And Michelle walks in and goes, hey, how was the physical therapy? It was okay.
And then actually just happened
today. And then for the next like hour and a half, you're feeling that way. And women, we'll talk about this on the next show. She's in tune. She's like, man, something's kind of off with this guy. He seems kind of down. And if you don't tell her, Michelle's left guessing. Did he have a bad day at work? Is he mad at me? Is he this? And say what you think. Because a lot of times when we share our feelings, they usually make total sense. So when you go, hey, what's going on? Hey, Michelle, PT today just was really hard, and I don't got it in me. I gave up. I didn't make any gains. I went backwards a little bit. I'm just feeling defeated today. Michelle doesn't go, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. That makes no sense to me. It actually makes perfect sense. And so when you hear that, you're like, oh, that actually matches what I'm seeing out of this guy, and it builds that connection. And so that's what I mean. Say what you think. So men will think all that stuff in their head, but they won't ever say it out loud. And then the wives go, oh, I don't think he's capable of sharing feelings or understands. Like, actually, he has tons of them and do that. You just didn't share them, but they're all there.
Right.
We've talked before about how that builds intimacy. Intimacy is, we've said, intimacy is vulnerability, and that allows me to then show up with more compassion and empathy for Ryan. And I feel like you don't necessarily show it. Like I possibly wouldn't even know if it was rough. You would just kind of like shove that down. But it does allow me to maybe then step up with other things and say, you know what, love, like, let me make dinner tonight, or let me do this, or just some other kind of compassion. Maybe I send him an extra encouraging message, or, bring a coffee to his work, just something to be like, I see you, I see what you're going through. I'm here on the same team with you. I love you. And like, I hear you.
Yeah. And that all happens, everything that Michelle said that was perfect, that all happens when you say, I'm struggling, or I've had a bad day. None of that happens when you say, I'm fine.
Right.
You go about your business, Michelle, and away we go. And then what happens if you play that pattern over and over, I'm fine, I'm fine, I'm fine. Then men, when you come into counseling, I hear it's like, Tony, I don't think my wife gets me. She don't understand me. You're probably right, but you haven't given her any opportunity to understand you, right? Listen to that answer that Michelle gave. Is like, oh, I would do this. I'd give you some time off. I'd do dinner. I'd give you some space. She does all, she understands me.
Yeah.
But she doesn't, when your wives aren't able to do that with fine, good, okay, boring, tired, all those kind of one-word answers that men we tend to do, you're not letting your wife connect with you.
Yeah. Yeah. I think another example of this actually happened today, because I had PT in the morning for my knee. And here's a power of outside perspective that I think we could share with our spouse, and they can bring something totally different, right? PT does stink, by the way. And it
especially when you go at 6 a.m. twice a week is so early for him.
But every day, like it's a grind and it's frustrating. I visited my surgeon today, and I walk in there and he's checking things out. He's like, "You're doing incredible." He's like, "Your knee is great. Like, this is amazing.
Right on track."
And I'm just like, "Oh, well, that feels really great." Because I'm stuck in the day-to-day and all of this and feeling so frustrated about it because I still feel that it's weak. But that outside perspective as I go in, and he's just like, wow, your knee is amazing. You're doing so great, and you're so, this and that. And like, I left and I was just like, oh man, I feel great.
Yeah.
but as I'm thinking about this, like, that's something that an outside perspective, when I actually share it, to have somebody that's outside of that come in and be like, hey, you're doing really great. Like, I know you feel this way. You're doing really great. I can see it. You're working hard. Like, I instantly, like, my feelings changed.
Yeah. And what's interesting about that is, why did the doctor tell you that? In a little weird roundabout ways, because you asked. That's the whole point of the appointment is, hey, I'm going to come in here and I'm going to ask him, how am I doing? How's my knee looking? Where am I at? And he's like, oh, you're doing great.
Yeah.
Right. If you didn't have that doctor's appointment, you wouldn't get that.
Right.
And so it's that one doesn't feel vulnerable because it's set up. It's like, oh, I'm going in there. But basically you're going in there to ask the doctor, how am I doing?
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know why you wouldn't go to your wife and go, how am I doing? Here's how I'm feeling.
Yeah. Yeah.
Good set. Oh, I'm glad you had PT today.
Yeah,
you're making all my examples. This is great, buddy.
Yeah.
Keep going.
Right. What are you hearing, Tony? Maybe one of the bigger things, like, what are you hearing that wives are really craving from their husbands?
Is communication. And the other big one I always hear is leadership, right? I want my husband to be a leader. And when you ask the husband, okay, what do you think about that? You usually hear something like, well, I don't think my wife would let me. She gets the kids up. She gets them going to soccer practice. She gets them going to school. She cleans it. My wife likes running the family. In fact, when I try and do this, she doesn't even really want me to help. And there's a big difference between running your family and leading your family. Wives want to be led. And wives aren't asking for all these little things. Yeah, they probably need some help on that. But what they're asking for is like, will you make the hard decisions? Will you take care of me? Will you do the tough stuff? Will you point the direction in our family that's going? A lot of times wives are like, I can take you there. We can do that. But I need to know what that is and where that looks like. And that's especially when we talk about faith, right? With that is, I always am hearing, I would love it if my husband would pray with us, if he would do devotions, if he would be the spiritual leader of the family. She doesn't always need you to load the dishwasher, but she does need you to take care of that piece. And I hear that frequently.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense because I think something we've heard is, you're looking at me, so I'm guessing you want me to weigh in, Ryan.
Yeah.
I've been trying to be quieter over here. I don't know if you guys have noticed. I've been trying to
listen to the man talk, right?
Let the guys talk. One of the things that we've heard is, and you've shared this, Ryan, is that a lot of men are used to leading at work. So then they come home and they maybe try to run it the same way. But I don't think that's the type of leadership. It's not like a bossing around your wife and kids like they're employees. So that's not the type of leadership either. And it's not, like you said, Tony, I don't think it's the tactical, just loading the dish. I'll lead us in loading the dishwasher. It is that, just that almost safety of knowing that I trust Ryan and I really do look to him. We make our decisions together, but ultimately, like, I do look to you for things like, hey, are we going to do this project around our house? Or even, do we need to replace this car? We have these conversations together, but I do feel like I really respect your decision. And I appreciate when you're able to be like, you know what, like, what do you think about this? And you kind of guide us in that direction with finances. I do most of the, the bill paying and day to day, but still with like just big picture, you're leading us there. And it's in a very loving, we're doing this together way, but you are leading.
Yeah. And that's a good example, like with money, is I can pay the bills, I can do this stuff, but what are we saving for? Or where are we going for that? It's like, hey, do we need a new car? Should we get a new car? What do you think? If the husband goes, yeah, okay, sounds good. Or no, I don't think so. You're not using your words. You're not sharing how you feel. And your spouse can't do that. As soon as, like you said, well, Ryan's like, well, this is what I'm thinking, and this is what's working, and this is what's going okay. Michelle, you're like, okay, I can go implement that. Mm-hmm. I can write the check for that. I can do those pieces. That's the running part, but the leadership part is like, I need some input. I want it to be a we, not just me saying yes or no, or just not this man going, this is how it is. Nah, you got to talk and communicate, but that's that leadership piece.
Yeah, I mean, I think, Michelle, you hit on this, but it's that difference between managing versus leading.
Yeah.
You're not like a manager telling your employees who are your family, like that's a whole different thing. Mm-hmm. And I think oftentimes that's what's happened is that men come home and they try to be managers and their wife, their kids are their employees.
Yeah. And the easiest way to see that is you can't do that with your faith and religion, right? The husband can't come in and go like, I want to be a godly family, now go. And you don't get your kids up for church and you don't pray and you don't do that. It's like, no, we're a godly family, now go take care of that. No, and so wives like, I need you to be that, because that's that role model, that's that demonstration. So when you talk about faith and big things, it's like, okay, if that's how you lead, you got to show that. Right. And so when you do those prayers and you do that stuff, it's like, oh, he's taking the lead in that and doing that. So I think that's what you'll hear is like, I want him to pray or do that, because it's a good way. Is you can't manage faith. You got to show it.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a great word. Absolutely. I mean, I think so much of leadership is showing your family. Like, it has to mean something to you. And you have to be willing to share that and the your feelings and the reasons why behind something, and not just telling them it's this way and that's the way.
Right. Your way or the highway.
Right.
Yeah, it doesn't usually go over super well.
Right. Yeah. So, well, Tony, this has been really great, and as we're kind of diving in for this episode has been for men. The next week will be for women.
Yeah.
So then I'll just sit and listen at that episode.
You can add in, though.
Right.
I've been adding in. Yes.
Right.
But
No,
we'll
absolutely.
switch spots, and I can
Yeah. So, Tony, maybe just as we leave here, what's one kind of tip that you would leave our listeners with?
Yeah. Men, don't wait till it's too late, right? Therapy isn't scary. Going and getting therapy isn't hard. Too often I will get emails, calls, messages where guys are going, Tony, I need to get into your office right now. And I'm like, okay, it's going to be a couple weeks. Nope, I need right now. My wife is going to leave me. We need to come into counseling right now. Okay, and then sometimes those people will come in and I'll get to talk to them, and I'll hear this story of the wife saying things like, I've been asking for 2 years. He's only coming in now. And I was like, why are you coming in now, buddy? Oh, my wife made me. What do you mean? She said I would leave, or she would leave if I didn't come in. So that's why I'm coming in. No, she didn't your wife didn't pick you up and carry you into counseling. She didn't make you come. You said, I don't want to lose my wife, so I'm coming in, which is cool. But how long has she been saying? And if you go back and you listen, you'll hear things that escalate. It's like, hey, after an argument, a wife will say something like, man, we should go in and talk and try and figure this out. I ain't going to counseling. Man, then 6 months, a year later goes by. We keep fighting about the same things. I really think we should get some outside help. No, I'm not going in. That's just dumb. Therapists don't matter. We'll figure this out. It'll be okay. And he looks at her and is like, oh, she seems to be okay. It's all right. So I guess we're good. Well, finally, she's had enough. And she goes, I'm done. And he goes, oh, we better go to counseling. Yeah. That's a lot of work of repair.
Yeah.
And you'll hear that guy sometimes, Tony, I've been doing everything she's been asking for the last 2 weeks, and she's just not coming around. She's kind of quiet and she's kind of cold. And I'm like, okay, so you're investing in your marriage and she's not really putting a lot in. How long have you been doing that? Oh, I've been doing that for 2 years.
Yeah.
All right, and you're getting frustrated after 2 weeks? Oh, buddy, we got some work. And so, men, don't be afraid to go get some help. Don't wait till it's too late. And say what you're thinking and share those feelings. You know how to do it. It's not as hard as you think.
You know, we used to play soccer with this guy that his role was to go and inspect bridges. And I just had this correlation as you were saying that, Tony, about not waiting until it's too late. When do you want to fix a deteriorating bridge? When it has like a little rock or a pebble falling off or a little tiny crack, not like when the whole bridge is falling, right? Like that's the whole point of his job. He's an architect, engineer. He goes out and inspects them so that the first little sign of some instability in that bridge, they can fix it. And I thought it's kind of the same thing. Like you want to be proactive and go in sooner. Don't wait until the whole thing's crumbling.
Absolutely. And that's actually something I do with premarital counseling. Is one of the last sessions when we're talking is like, all right, you guys need to come once a year. Just come and check in and see how you're doing.
That's great.
Nothing bad needs to be happening, but I would much rather you get in that pattern of let's go in and check, because too often what happens is I won't see you for 5 years. And then there's 5 years worth of hurt and frustration that we have to work our way back to remind this couple that they do love each other and they're okay. And so, it's inspecting that, doing that early is like, there shouldn't be any danger in coming in and talking, hey, how are we doing?
Yeah.
All right. Checking the bridge. It's easy. I like that.
All right, Tony, this has been so good. Any parting thoughts for our listeners?
Since this is about men, hey, men, be a cheerleader. We're going to talk about that with women too, but men, be a cheerleader. And what I mean by that is share and cheer when your wife is doing something right and good. We spend a lot of time pointing out when wives don't do something right. I'm terrible at it. My wife will do a great job of telling me, hey, Tony, here's where we're going. Here's what's happening, kind of keeping me updated on the family and what's happening, where I need to be. And once in a while, she won't. And, I'm really good at pointing out, like, hey, you didn't tell me that. And you didn't do what you needed to do. And that's kind of frustrating. And why didn't you do that? That's like 1 out of 20. The other 20, I just don't say anything. And what I mean by being a cheerleader is I need to cheer her on and say, hey, thanks for all that work that you do, taking the time to do that, because we got to cheer on the positive, and we tend to focus on the negative. So it's kind of the general theme is, men, go grab your pom-poms, be a cheerleader, and just be positive, cheer that on. You don't want to be known as the guy that points out the 1 out of 20 that it goes bad. There's 19 that your wife is rocking it. Probably should let her know.
Tony, do you want to use this moment to give your wife a shout out?
All right.
Her name is also Michelle.
Michelle, you do a great job of taking care of me 90% of the time. Thank you.
Tony, I feel like you need probably 100% of the time, Michelle. Great job, Michelle.
100% of the time.
Nobody's perfect. Come on.
99.
99%.
I take care of my wife probably 60% of the time, so she's way better than me. I wasn't going to say I'm 100. So you do awesome, Michelle. Happy Valentine's Day to you.
Right.
To our listener, thank you so much for joining us on the show today. It's been so much fun. We're excited to have you back, Tony, for week 2. Next week, we're talking to you women, giving you ideas for how to improve in your relationship and how to communicate and do things better with your spouse. We'll find out. I don't even know. Maybe communication's not it. We'll find out. So thank you for joining us. And you can find us at Celebrate.church/marriage. And you can find resources there. We hope you have a great rest of your week.
Have a great week.
Bye.